Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for today's conference session, Sustainability in Retail. My name is Ashley and I'm the conference manager for the marketplace. Just a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Everyone is muted by default except for the speakers. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can type them into the question or chat box and we'll bring them up at the end. This session will also be recorded so you can come back and watch it again. The recording will be available on the marketplace tomorrow. Today's conference session will be a conversation format about sustainability in retail featuring our speakers, Jerry Wheeler, CEO and co-founder at Castlefelt, and Tommy Brown, retail manager and buyer of conservation goods at the St. Louis Zoo. So to get started, our first conversation point will be sustainability. What does it mean and why should I have a plan? So I'll let you guys take it away if you want to tell the story of sustainability.
Sure, I can start on that. Thanks everybody for being here and wanting to listen to our sustainable journey. I don't know how advanced everybody is, so we figured we'd just give a little history when Tommy and I were talking about sustainability or started and really what it meant to us or myself as a brand when I got started over 17 years ago in sustainability. And what really struck me is I think leaving things in better order or as in good order as you found them so future generations can enjoy them, I think is probably the standard definition that everybody sees. For me, there's three defining moments when I was sourcing overseas, and it was just sheer pollution. In Asia, which many of you may have been there, but back in late 90s and early 2000s, it was different than it is today. Fortunately, it has gotten better. And then social conditions are always a real concern, and that's really apparent as well. And then I think what really did it for me finally when I was getting started was really my own kids and how much of a lack of understanding kids have today, and maybe even adults, in how products are made and the impacts they have. So for me, it's really leaving things in a better order for everybody to come. So Tommy, I'll let you add your color there.
Well, coming from the zoo industry and the aquarium world as well, we definitely want to see homeostasis take effect for all of our environmental systems and whatnot like that, because anything can offset these environments for our animals that we deal with throughout the world. So therefore, we really think it's important to make sure that we're analyzing everything, not only in the retail aspect of the zoos and aquarium industry, but also in the aspect of what we're doing in the community locally and how we're helping those ecosystems within our environments in our own communities. So that's where we kind of stand from a zoo and aquarium aspect, is we want to make sure that everything we do has a sustainable message and a plan. So that's where we stand from our industry.
Yeah, I think that's great. And one of the second topic here really is how it's good for people, planet, business. I'm sure everybody's heard that. It's called the triple bottom line. It's called all types of different things: human capital, natural capital. But I think we're all in business, and I think the reality is most people look at only the financial aspects of that business, and I think it's really important that we look at almost an environmental P&L, profit and loss, and a social profit and loss. That's what we do. And ultimately, it's been good for our business, even though it's better for people and planet, because we're more efficient. We're more profitable. We can turn products faster. So it really does have an impact on the business. And I know we'll get more into this, Tommy, later, but it also impacts what consumers think.
That's absolutely true. Because if we're running a business that's going to be sustainable, which we really try to do at the St. Louis Zoo and throughout our industry, is that we have to look at not just what we sell, but how we're selling it. Do we have solar energy? Do we care about wind power? Do we have alternatives to fixturing? again, we have to look at a whole picture instead of just, oh, this is the product I'm selling. How is everything we're doing impacting what we're doing within the zoo and in our community as well? So I think when you break those down, like you said, into those elements of the people, the planet, and the business, I think that's very important. So when we're dealing with things like this within the gift store, we want to make sure that we're looking, like I said, more than just the product, but what we're doing as a whole, our water consumption, our electric consumption, everything like that, because this all matters. It all takes part of what we're dealing with here in our little ecosystem. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Perfect.
We,
Oh, you can go ahead, or I can. I was
go
just
ahead.
going to say, it looks like our next talking point is how sustainability is like pizza.
Tommy and I are trying to find a way to make this a little more interesting and light, because sustainability can sometimes get heavy. And we both agreed that we like pizza. You know, Tommy's in St. Louis, and I'm in Denver, but I grew up in Chicago. And you know, the funny part, the way I like to look at pizza and ice cream is everybody can agree on what pizza is, but there's so many different varieties, and it doesn't necessarily make it good or bad. It's just I might like Chicago deep dish, and Tommy might like St. Louis style. I guess you call it medium crust, right?
Thin, very thin, with pearl
um,
cheese.
so, but you know, that's really, I think, that's where Tommy and I hit it off, and I think it's important for people to look at sustainability, you know, very pragmatically. And you know, there's a lot of different varieties, and it needs to be right for you. And it doesn't necessarily mean that one is better than the other, but that we're driving in the right direction to you know, make positive change.
Exactly. And it's going to be up to your company or institution of what you find important. Because what a zoo may find important, maybe a museum doesn't find that important. So you've got to take what you want to do and make an action plan and strive for that action plan. No one's ever going to be perfect at this, that's for sure. But we're going to try our best, because just living is going to impact the world. I mean, think about how much stuff you consume every day. We're consumers. That's what we do. We're consuming, but we have to be responsible in that consumption.
Our next talking point is sustainability. Why does it matter? So if someone wants to speak on how we are all connected.
Sure, I'll jump in there first. Um, you know, from a product perspective, which is you know, where my experience is with sustainability, it really comes down to life cycle of a product and really understanding the system that you're producing in. Um, you know, just like most products, they're a lot more complicated than people think on the surface, and you know, there's more to a product than just, you know, the material that you're making it. And I think that's important in how we're connected, because we may be farming cotton in the United States, and we may be farming cotton in Turkey, and we might be farming cotton and sourcing recycled polyester out of, you know, Asia. Um, there's lots of different communities. There might be dye houses in 3 different countries. There might be spinning impacts of that yarn. There may be cut and sew facilities in, you know, 2 or 3 different countries. So all the inputs we put into that product are important, because all those inputs come out as outputs into somebody's backyard, that isn't always visible, you know, in our own backyard. It can be pretty far extended, and that's true with most products. And I think, you know, even at the retail level, which obviously Tommy can talk, you know, much more in depth, that also has an impact, because there's so many different types of products you have to buy. it's almost more difficult than what I do as a brand, because I know I have to make, maybe 25 different types of products, and I can do that in, 3 or 4 different supply chains. So it's important to understand that there's always people involved, there's always communities involved, and there's always consequences. So everybody's connected.
It's very true. And you have to know the lifespan of that product too, how the product starts, what the product is, and how the product will end. So as buyers, you really need to understand that and say, where are these products coming from? Where are they going? And then how are we being responsible at the end to either sustainably put them back into the system again or take them out of the system carefully? Because again, everything is in a system. So if it's cardboard, we can bring that back in as a renewable product. We keep bringing that back until eventually it does need cardboard will, but it can be used several times throughout its lifespan if it's done properly. Again, we have to know where everything's going to end up as well. If it's packaging that's not necessary, such as acetate windows on some products, and a lot of our companies have worked with zoos and aquariums to actually take those acetate windows off because they end up in our oceans and landfills. They don't break down for many years. So if we can just get things to the basics of what the product is and how the product can end its lifespan, we're doing much better for the world.
That brings us to our next point: ecosystem preservation, lessons in bamboo and organic cotton and palm oil.
Now, on those aspects, many of us that work in the zoo and aquarium industry, we hear about palm oil and how bad and evil it might be sounding. But overall, palm oil is a sustainable resource. Thus, the RSVO organization that looks at palm oil and says, well, we have these palm plantations already. It is a renewable resource. It's sustainable. But the problem with palm oil is that they're growing these plantations. And when they grow plantations, then it comes and destroys habitats for like our orangutans. And when they destroy habitats, there's no place for these animals to live. And that's an issue. So again, we got to look at sustainability in different ways. Yes, the product itself, palm oil, is sustainable, but if you overtake the land that's good for the animals and the ecosystems to grow more plantations, then that's devastating to the ecosystems there. So again, it's that fine balance of what is sustainable and how are you affecting the environment around you.
Yeah, I think from the responsible kind of materials space, bamboo and organic cotton, really come up, and bamboo somewhat people feel it stands on its own, but it's really rayon. It's it's bamboo fiber that's emulsified in chemicals and um, then extruded into fiber, which is no different than any other type of rayon. It comes down to is rayon responsibly manufactured or is it not responsibly manufactured? So, bamboo, there's nothing necessarily wrong with bamboo. It grows fast. It doesn't need much water, but it has to be grown in a responsible forest that, doesn't utilize, underage labor or child labor or prison labor, right? In a lot of cases, and they can't. It'll grow back on its own, but they still can't do it in a detrimental, way to the community there where it's growing. And then the other aspect of it is where it's produced. How are they handling all the chemicals that are used to produce the bamboo? There's a few companies that do it well. There's most of them that don't in that space. If you look at more expensive products like a company out of Germany called Lensing that does Modal and Tencel, which you've probably seen on your products. That's all made from beechwood. It's responsibly forested. It's all a closed loop system. They recycle the water. They use the steam to, run the boilers. They use the bark for a variety of different things, and then they replant specific forests. So from that standpoint, it produces a similar product in a much better situation. So I think that's a really important one. Organic cotton, I don't know how familiar with people are with organic cotton. Um, it's about 2% of the crop in the world, opposed to regular cotton. It does conserve water, which is really important with cotton. It creates healthy soil. So it does mitigate some of the risk associated with regular cotton production, but it doesn't mitigate everything. Cotton's not not the perfect answer. So we're always in search for other things, and it's important to know how those things are made and how it impacts, the ecosystem and the good bugs and all those things that grow on a cotton farm. And if you've ever haven't been to a cotton farm, I suggest you go, because it's pretty fun to go to a conventional one and then go to a organic one and really hear the difference. So you can hear the difference.
Okay, now we would like to talk about responsible products equal healthy ecosystems.
Tommy, I can jump in on this one just to start. You know, in our world, that's what it's all about with products. How can we be as responsible as we can? And I think I alluded to it before. It's about more than just the materials we use. So it's about more than bamboo or organic cotton. It's like what we're using, how are we producing, those products throughout the entire value chain or life cycle of the product. Um, what kind of dye stuffs are we using? What are our factories doing, within their communities to recycle waste, water, energy, and, reduce the impacts of any product on climate change, because you just can't get away from it. And that ultimately is good for the ecosystem. Do we create problems? Absolutely. We always do. And it's constantly changing. So I think when you look at your products in your store, or if you're another brand and you're looking at different products, you have to really dig back in to that life cycle, and you have to map it, and you have to understand where you have blind spots, and you have to understand where you have transparency and visibility, and you have to ask lots of questions. And I think that's one thing that probably retailers can do. Probably the most important thing retailers can do is ask questions of their vendors. So
That is absolutely true. You have to ask the questions, but you also have to be able to forgive yourself. Many times as buyers, we'll hear of a great new green product that's on the market that's going to save the world. Don't jump into conclusions and think that what you're hearing is always true. You always need to research everything. Again, buyers are being marketed to, just as the general public is being marketed to. So you always want to make sure you have a correct message. That's so important. If you're selling this to the general public, you as the buyer need to make sure you have the information to give to the public and that it's correct information. You want to make sure that you're giving that message in an honest opinion. You also want to make sure that it goes back to the mission of your organization. So if something is not matching the mission of your organization, ask yourself, is there an alternative? Can I buy another product that will match the mission better? Sometimes there is no alternatives, but don't beat yourself up about this. Sometimes we do have to sell things like bottled water, for example. We know that bottled water is a product that's hard to get rid of in our nation right now. There are manufacturers trying boxed waters, they're trying bubbled water, they're trying all these different types of water and even refillables. So we're working through those things. Again, as you would say, it's a process. And these processes take time. We just can't throw things out right at the moment that we find out, oh, this is really bad. We have to work to get rid of some of these products or to change them to make them better for our mission and our environment. And that's what I think we're all trying to strive for. It's just that it's going to take some more time. Just like our zoo went plastic bag free. So we no longer have plastic bags that we're throwing back into the environment. Again, a responsible uh, thing that we're doing here at the St. Louis Zoo to help with those issues. So again, we have to be open-minded that things are going to take time to change, but we can recognize where the change needs to be.
So we would also like to talk about how sustainability is constantly challenged and changing.
Yeah, I think Tommy, you framed this pretty well walking into this question. um, we're probably amongst one of the biggest changes any of us have seen in recent history. In the last 9 months have created um, a challenge to sustainability, and I felt this coming early on, and back in March and April, just the sheer amount of waste associated with masks, hospital waste. Tommy, you brought it up earlier when we were talking, takeout, right? And all the waste associated with takeout. So, to apply sustainability and the challenges that we always face, to something that we're faced with right now, I think is a good, talking point, because, you can't do anything without impact, and we're constantly running into, new challenges that we're going to have to address. And I think, the single-use plastics has been, a journey from, boy, the last 15 to 20 years that we've been fighting and trying to change, those habits. And we had made a lot of headway in the last 5 years. And, a lot of that went out out the back door with the pandemic and whatnot. So I think it's important to maybe look at those concepts for the conversation here.
Absolutely. I think that we're really going to have to focus on what we're going to do with all of this waste now that we've had during the COVID-19 epidemic and pandemic. It's around the world. So we're not the only one facing these problems. They're facing these issues in Europe, in Africa. So as a world, how are we going to address these issues? Can these products of waste be recycled into something or not? How can they be disposed of that won't impact the environment as badly? Is there some insect or something like that that can break the products down? Because we actually know that mealworms can break down polyfoam now. They actually can eat that, which is awesome. But again, it would take a lot of those to do it. So again, things are evolving, science is evolving, and we've got to see what we can do to impact this issue now after the virus. So hopefully we can all come up with a solution, but it's going to take a world solution to do this.
Yeah, there's no good. Unfortunately, there's no silver bullet, right?
No.
In this case, and I think that's fundamentally at the root of sustainability. Is it's always a challenge, and there's never one solution to a problem. And sometimes when you do find a solution, you create another problem that you never saw coming. Like some of the waste issues we're faced with. And I think, maybe, Tommy, you can talk to a little bit about trade-offs. I think as we go through this journey with all these wastes and trying to get back to where we're eliminating single-use plastics and some of these products that we've made more prevalent, there's going to be trade-offs that we're going to have to look at.
Absolutely. And again, nobody is perfect. Let's make sure that buyers understand that. We are human. We will make mistakes. We do our best. That's all we can ask. We need to have an action plan, know our mission. That's very important. and understand that everything that we do is in line with the mission of our organization. And being conscious of the environment, sustainability, those are all part of everybody's mission that I know of that's in a conservation society. So this is what we have to make sure we're striving for. And forgive yourself. Like I said, don't beat yourself up, because every day there's going to be a new product on the market that you may not know an aspect of. But we're learning, and we go as we go.
Yeah, I think I'll use one of my bad analogies again, like pizza. Um, but trade-offs, you could look at it from a standpoint of, I can eat a cheeseburger or I can eat an apple. And I think, each one has an element of risk to it, probably, you could say. But the cheeseburger is definitely going to have a lot more risk than the apple. And I think that's what we need to look at when you're buying products, and when you're making products, and when you're making any choice. I mean, that's sustainability's core, is somewhat risk mitigation, and what can I do, or what can our organization do, or what can my suppliers do, or my vendors do to eliminate risk. And is that product or service or process helping us do that? And that ultimately leads to what most people know is conservation, right? Conservation is somewhat a risk mitigation um, policy.
Exactly. But I'm going to go for the cheeseburger sometimes myself,
Right.
just because it's really good. And that's another way we should look at things. Sometimes people are going to buy stuff just because they like it. And we have to give them an alternative of that like. For example, let's look at ivory. Ivory is something that was a precious commodity throughout the world. It's devastating to elephants. It wipes out these herds. So we have to give people the alternative to ivory. So we've done that through tagua nuts. So there's many companies out there now doing vegetable ivory, which is awesome, because we've given people an alternative. Instead of slaughtering elephants and hurting ecosystems, we are able to give them an alternative and say, hey, use this that actually supports the rainforest, because it doesn't hurt the rainforest and it keeps it intact. And people will protect what they're making money off of, because if you see a value in something, you're going to protect it. So if they see a value in the rainforest from those tagua nuts that they're making these beautiful jewelry pieces out of course they're going to protect it, and thus protecting the ecosystem and bringing sustainability to that area. So that's very important. Again, all perspective and how we view things, but you have to have that value, and that value does play a part in sustainability.
Yeah, I think that takes it full circle, Tommy. I mean, it's a conservation effort, right? Or it started as a conservation effort, to save the elephants, right?
Right.
And that's really what it was about. But coming up with other product alternatives, so people didn't harvest the ivory, ended up being a risk mitigation strategy, but it led to better conservation. I mean, and
Yeah.
that's how interconnected sustainability is, and how complicated it is. And you really need to educate yourself in the areas that you want to focus in, so you can understand what all those interrelated aspects are. And that's where sustainability is fun and also really complicated.
Yes, because that's helping elephants in Asia and Africa, and this product comes from South America. So we are one world global society. And by having these alternatives in different places throughout the world is helping us all as a whole. So it's a beautiful thing. We love to do that.
Perfect. That brings us to our next point, that is, let's move on to questions and steps to building a sustainable retail model. Jerry, do you want to start with how people can know your product story?
Sure, I can do that. This is kind of the last section before the question and answer. I know Tommy and I wanted to leave everybody maybe with some actionable things that you could do or discuss or have conversations around. So this is our attempt to do that for you. I'll kind of kick it off with know your product story. I don't know how many of you know me or have seen our products at Castlefell, but I've been in this space for better part of 17, almost 20 years now with manufacturing sustainable apparel and textiles. And really being an expert in the supply chain and supply chain mapping. So when we built the brand a few years back, everybody said, well, it should have a name like Eco or it should be green. And I'm like, no, it shouldn't, because that's not what it's about. It's not about just green products. It's really, Castlefell is about a story, and it's about how products are made, and it's about how products get to market, and it's about how products are sold and how they're used and how they're disposed of. And we look at every aspect of our product, from the design side, which is totally different than most companies, and from the supply chain side. And I think that's what makes us different, and it helps frame a conversation around products in, are they designed for disassembly? Are they designed to be made in a supply chain that is sustainable, or are you trying to design and make something that doesn't exist in a supply chain today, or it's such a commodity that it exploits the supply chain, the people, and the environment to get the product to market, which is what you see most of the time. So I think knowing your product story is just a real simple way to talk about how your products are made. And I think it's a funny story. It's real quick, but my son, when we kind of came up with this tagline, we were in a cut and sew. He was 6 years old and he was with me and he wanted to come. It was a US made product. We walked in, they were making polos in the factory. And if you've ever been to an apparel factory, there's piles of bodies, collars, not bodies, not people, bodies of shirts, cuffs, sleeves, and it doesn't look like a shirt. And he had this funny look on his face. And I said, well, what do you think? And he said, well, it doesn't look like a polo like I wear to school. And I said, well, it's not made yet. And he had this funny look on his face. And I go, well, where'd you think polos came from? And he goes, the store. And I was like, oh, it's a good point. And that was really what framed it. So I looked up at the light switch. I flipped the light on. I go, where do you think the light comes from? And he goes, the switch. And I'm like, so it was perfect. It was a 6-year-old's perspective of how, products get to market and how, electricity is made. But I think we all forget that sometimes. And it's important to dig back in and know that story.
I agree. And again, from our perspective, economics drive everything. Everything is driven by economics within the world. And again, adding that value to whatever product you're doing, people are voting with their wallets. They're voting for sustainability, or they're not voting for sustainability. We have the power as buyers to make that vote. We're the gatekeepers between us and the general public. Whatever we do as buyers affects our customers. Like it or not, we are responsible. So always think about that when you're at market and say, how am I impacting the world as an individual? How am I impacting my mission? And am I making my customer happy? Those are all things that you should always think about. Because again, right or wrong, you have to have a balancing act. And some of that balancing act may not be the best for your ecosystems, but it might be the best for your bottom line. Again, you have to have that balancing act. And we'll strive to always bring the best product to our stores. But again, as I said before, like bottled water, it's a great moneymaker for most zoos, aquariums, and museums and whatnot. But there are going to have to be some alternatives come in place, and so we can actually phase these things out eventually. It's not something that we can do overnight. And thanks to your company, you're actually taking the bottles and recycling them, making them into these great t-shirts, which is great. So there's an end to the product if we can capture that. Again, it's about capturing these things at the end, and so they don't end up in landfills and they don't end up in our oceans. We have to be responsible to capture the end product. Just like when our manufacturers send us stuff to the stores, and they were all individually wrapped in plastic and bubble wrap, and then a cardboard box inside of a cardboard box, inside of another plastic bag and another box. Well, a lot of our manufacturers we talked to, and they've actually stopped doing this. But again, it takes buyers to communicate this to your vendors and say, is there an alternative way to ship this product? Is there an alternative way to make your product, to make it more eco-friendly, to make it sustainable? But again, it comes down to the buyer. The buyer is the gatekeeper. You are the gatekeeper between the customer and the vendor. The vendor doesn't know everything until they're let known by the buyer. The buyer can go, hey, you wasted all this money on packaging, we're throwing it away, or hopefully we're recycling the cardboard, but is it necessary? And those are conversations that need to take place between the buyer and the vendor. And then us as the buyer also need to communicate what we're doing to our visitor, because our visitor may not know what we're doing. We could be doing wonderful things within our organization with sustainability. And unless we get that message out to them, they have no idea. Like your son, oh, this is how the pole was made. He had no idea until someone let him know. And that's the one thing that we have to do as zoos, aquariums, museums, is educate our consumer. An educated consumer is powerful, and they can do wonderful things within the world, but they have to have the information. And that's where we come in. As buyers, we need to make sure that the products are signed appropriately, that we're communicating these messages and stories appropriately. Everybody loves a story. Everybody does. Storytelling has been with our cultures throughout generations. So if you can sit and tell them a good story about a product and how good it is for sustainability in the world, and how it helps people, and how it helps economics and ecosystems, they're going to listen to you because it's an interesting story. It's really fantastic. So again, please make sure that you understand the power you have as a buyer. You are the gatekeeper. So that's my message for the buyers today.
That's good. I think that's a good segue.
Yeah, so let's segue to sustainability is not a zero-sum game of right or wrong. It's a journey.
Yeah, I think Tommy covered most of it.
Okay, perfect. I kind of thought so.
But you touched on the consumer, and I'll just say one more thing, and we can kind of jump into some, kind of 5 steps of getting started here, and then have a Q&A. But I think it is. Sustainability is not a zero-sum game, and I think your water bottle is a perfect example, right? If you know your customer in a zoo or aquarium, you got to have bottled water. You can also have a water station where they can fill their water bottles, but sometimes people forget them, and if it's hot at the zoo, it's something you have to offer in some way. You could turn a blind eye and say, I'm not going to offer any bottled water because I totally disagree with it. But does that really solve a problem of, trying to eliminate single-use plastics? Probably not, because now you're not even talking about it, and you maybe put your customer at risk because they're going to overheat at the zoo if it's 95 degrees and humid in St. Louis, right? So in that case, I think it really is, important to understand that sometimes you can't get there in one day. And, we see that a lot. It's the elephant in the room probably is, microplastics. We see that a lot in apparel, but I don't want to turn a blind eye to polyester, because polyester is not going away. Plastic is not going away. And I would argue that to the end of my days with anybody. So when someone says, well, I'm not going to carry, your product because it's made from recycled plastic, I would just sometimes walk out because I'm like, well, that's fine. That's your choice. But, that's not solving a problem. If you really want to be a part of the solution, you have to engage in industry and with science and understand, how did we get here? How did it create that? And are there better ways to, eliminate it? So I think there's always two sides to the story, right? So.
Absolutely. There's always two sides to the story. And you need to listen. Listen to your customer and listen to your vendors. It's very important to hear their views. If you don't listen, you're going to miss out on things. So they may know something that you don't know. Always have that ear open, because like people that may have walked out on you because, oh, it has microplastics. Well, did you have a conversation that says, well, how do we trap these microplastics at the end of the water system? Because that's a solution. If you can trap the microplastics before they get into the waterways, then you solved an issue. But now you brought new life to plastics again, because that water bottle is now a t-shirt, and that t-shirt can be recycled into whatever, something else. Plastic is plastic. It is what it is. And it's great for the medical industry because it's sterile. Can you imagine having to go and get a shot with a syringe that would be metal that they would actually clean each time? I don't think we trust that very much. So again, plastics play a role within our nation, within our world now. We just have to know how to do it sustainably and how to reclaim it and bring it back into another product. Once we get that science down, we're good. But again, as you said, plastics aren't going anywhere. They're going to be around for a long time. And we also want to make sure we're able to live in harmony with them. It's just like people living with, for example, bears in their environment. Bears can attack you, but you also know what not to do to lure the bear in. So you don't leave your garbage out for the bears, because that brings them in and makes them comfortable with people. So you have to be responsible and do things in a responsible way so we can live together in harmony and reach that point of homeostasis, which is going to be that equal balance between plastics, that your company uses, and the environment. Everything has to have this balance. But make sure you know what you're doing with that plastic bottle like this. After you're done, you've got to make sure that you're able to recycle it and bring it into great new life like what you guys do, which is awesome.
Thanks.
Perfect. Do you guys want to get into the 5 steps to getting started?
Sure, we can do that. Tommy, you want to talk a little bit about alignment?
Sure. When you have an organization, no matter what kind of organization it is, you need to have goals. What are your goals? 1, 2, and 3. Say 1 is we're going to help with water waste. We're going to help with trash. We're going to help with, product development that uses less unsustainable goods. If you make these lists and you bring them together and say, this is our goals as an organization, or your buying goals yourself, then see how you can bring those into fruition. Now, like I said again, don't beat yourself up if you make a mistake. We're going to do it. We're going to make mistakes. We're striving to do our best. Okay? So again, make sure your goals align with the organization's goal. And if you're in a zoo, aquarium, museum, 9 times out of 10, it's going to have sustainability and conservation within those goals. So always make sure they align. That's very important. And that's coming from an organization that has retail within the organization. Now, going back to you as a manufacturer, you don't have that kind of complexity that you're an organization within an organization within an organization. So it's a little different from this aspect.
Yeah, and it's important. I'll jump in to map your journey here, but it's important for us to really be in tune to what you need. And I say you as in our, as a retailer at like the St. Louis Zoo, and help you understand how our product aligns with your goals, because that helps you align our product with, the consumer. So that alignment's really important, and it's not an easy thing to do. It takes some time to understand what's important. And like we said before, it's like pizza. There's lots of options. There's lots of varieties, and there's not one that's right or wrong. One of the things that I think would be really important, whether a brand or or retail is mapping the products that you do have, and outside of products, you can also map the things you use most often in your organization. And you can start by just making, we do this in supply chain all the time. You start by making a massive list of everything, and then you boil it down and you say, okay, I'm going to frame this and say, what's really important to me? So what do we use 80% of the time? And what do we sell, that is 80% of our revenue, right? I mean, because you're probably selling more of that. And then really look at those, products and find out, how do they get to you? Where are they made? What vendors do you use? And start to drive back into, those supply chains and those value chains a little bit. It's sometimes a really eye-opening, exercise, because there's no bad answer, right? No is not a bad answer when you're mapping like that. No means, wow, I don't have visibility. And now you're at least aware of what you didn't know, that you don't have any visibility. You don't know where it comes from. And you can go ask those questions. Maybe it's, I've never asked that vendor of that keychain, where that comes from. I'm not picking on them vendors of the keychains, but maybe you get back in there and you ask that vendor and they say, gosh, I have no clue. That's really not a good answer. If they can answer, yes, we use, a really great factory that's run on this. We're mapping the types of materials we're using, but we haven't gotten all the answers yet. You have a pretty good feeling that they're probably doing the right work. They just haven't gotten to where they need to be yet. And that's okay. It's okay, not to be there. The important part is to have a plan, and, be able to map your path and chart that course. So I think that's really, something that is fundamentally fairly easy to do, when you have the time. But it's important.
I agree. 100% full disclosure and visibility of companies are so important. There's companies that actually do invite buyers to their manufacturing or warehousing or wherever, so we can see firsthand what's going on. And those companies are awesome to work with because we know that they're being transparent. We know what they're saying is true. And that's so important. There's been so many different advancements now, besides your company using plastic bottles for shirts. If you've looked around a lot of the shows, there's a lot plush manufacturers now going to plastic that's recycled from bottles. So it's really wonderful to see this forefront of plastic taking a new shape. It's not going into landfills, it's going into a product that can be used and used and used, which is awesome. And I think we're going to see more of that in the future, because as you said before, it's not going away. But the transparency of these companies is very important. If they say they're doing something, then make sure they're doing it. Check up on them, ask them the questions, verify. If you have friends over in that nation, give them a call and say, hey, can you run down to this place and see if this is really happening? I do this quite a bit in my industry, actually, because I want to make sure, number one, I'm not using labor that's forced labor. And I think that's immoral, and it's totally against my ethics, and we will not support that at the St. Louis Zoo either. We think it's very important that fair wages are given, people are treated in a kind manner and that they're given respect. So the human element is also very important besides just the economic element here. And then, of course, we go into the sustainability and ecosystems and helping the animals, because those are all very important. Again, part of the mission and part of the journey and mapping the journey, does it hit all of these boxes? And again, us being an organization of retail within the organization, we're here to support the organization itself as well. So it's a very complex organization, a zoo, an aquarium, and museum. They're not, and gardens as well, because we're dealing with so many different facets of science, of sustainability, of environments. And we all have to work together in order to come up with a lot of these plans and these maps that we draw out, saying, well, this affects this and this affects this. And we have to fit ourselves into those missions and plans and mapping technologies that we can use now on the web and whatnot, which is great because a lot of us are interconnected too now. A lot of us zoos, aquariums, and nature institutions, that we can say, hey, this research is showing this and this research is showing that. And sharing a lot of this information between each other has been so helpful. Thank goodness for the cloud. That's all I gotta say on that one. It's really helped science, it's helped communications between our organizations, and hopefully helping the world here in the future.
Yeah, I think you probably, I think Tommy, you took care of the second or the third kind of step we had, which is really, it's more about it's about more than just products, right? The social aspects, you know, transportation, waste, all these different pieces, and that kind of circles back and aligns with that alignment piece. You know, so alignment, map your journey. You know, what's outside of just products, right? I mean, I know we're talking retail here, but you know, what is outside of the products? And then I think, you know, what do I ask my vendors? You know, one of the things we say is we're gonna give you the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, not to use an old movie term, but or title, but there's no way. You know, one of the things you can ask a vendor, and if a vendor starts telling you they're the greatest thing since sliced bread, you can almost just say you're not for me, because that may just be one product, right? Don't just look at a vendor's product. Ask that vendor about more than just the product. You want to know what they do well. You want to know what they don't do well. You want to know what they're doing to really push the envelope and do things that are different. And they should be able to answer those questions for you from that standpoint. And that's a broader scope for your vendors than just drilling them on product. If you want to drill down onto product, you know, there's lots of ways to start. It can be, you know, do you have certifications, right? Do you have visibility in the supply chain? Have you mapped your supply chain? Do you know all your, you know, your vendors? And a lot of times they'll say, sure, I know my vendor. I have in my case, apparel. I know my cut and sew. It's in this part of Asia. And there's about 5 other steps or 8 other steps in the apparel process, 5 to 8 steps, depending on what kind of material you're using, where there can be impact. So it's important to ask those questions, and, you know, they're common sense. My email's on here. You're always, you know, welcome to ask me if you want vendor questions. I'll fire them your way. So, and then I think the last one, Tommy, you were going to handle, which is, you know, really communicating sustainability. And I know we do whatever we can to help give you the tools to understand how our product's made, which I think is important, you know, which all vendors should do.
So communicating sustainability to your customers. First of all, if you don't know what sustainability is by now after this lecture, then I would recommend going to the Sustainable Development Goals for the United Nations. It's great website. It has a lot of information, and it can really break down goals for you. So that way you can take a piece of what the United Nations goal is in for sustainability and apply it to your organization. And when you do that, not only are you just communicating within your organization, you'll have the tools then to communicate outside your organization. again, they're just random sustainability issues that the United Nations feel is important. And a lot of these align with a lot of zoos, museums, aquariums, and garden goals. So take a look at those. It helps you word things. It'll help you bring things into perspective. It'll talk about things like poverty. It'll talk about supply chains. It'll talk about environmental impacts. And these are all sustainability efforts that the United Nations is doing. So take a look at that on their website. You'll be amazed at what they've come up with.
Yep.
And sometimes we don't think about things like that,
No,
but
and you
there
can
is
report into that. If you get
organization.
advanced enough, you can report, you can report your organization, back to the UN and what you're doing, and they'll list it. So it's complicated at that level, but you can do it.
You can do it. And a lot of our organizations are so big now that they should be working hand in hand with a lot of these goals. And so hopefully, it's going to be a team effort. It's going to be a team effort between huge organizations like the UN, organizations like zoos, aquariums, museums, and gardens, and manufacturers like yourself, all in this sustainability effort. It can't just be one person. It's going to take, as they always say, it takes a village.
Yeah.
And we're in a very big village right now. So we're really going to have to start looking out for one another and really helping these sustainability efforts throughout the world.
Agreed.
Great. Well, you guys did a wonderful job and we greatly appreciate it. It looks like we do have a few minutes for questions and answers. If anyone has any, please feel free to put them in the chat function. And if you ever think of questions after the session, you can always email Jerry or Tommy, as well as message them in the marketplace. We don't have a question, but Sue said, great job, Tommy and Jerry. That was very
Thank you, Sue.
Gosh, that's pretty good. We covered everything. I guess we bored people to death, one or the other.
I don't know, Jerry.
Wonderful.
It was pretty fun, though. We had a good time, and now I'm hungry from all the pizza and cheeseburger comments.
Yeah, So.
But I'm gonna get them unwrapped. Okay, so eliminate that trash. All right.
And now you're making me hungry.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, I appreciate everything that you guys do. You've been very, very good within our industry. We appreciate it.
No, you guys have been great supporter of ours, and if anybody has questions, they can always, I think, fire them back and forth, to you and me on kind of how we've communicated our product, just as an example too. And if we can help other brands, or you want other brands, I always help other brands as well. So always willing to jump in there.
Me too. So anytime anybody needs anything, always feel free to ask, email, call, whatever you need to do, or see me at a show. Hopefully we'll be back to those here soon.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Yes, that's the goal. We do have a show coming up, Grand Strand. I'm not sure if either one of you will be at that, but that will be in the beginning of December. And then hopefully we'll have it more in the spring.
It's a very awesome show, and I will not be attending this year, but it is a great show.
Okay, well, thank you both so much again. I greatly appreciate your time, and you did such a wonderful job. And then just as a reminder to anyone watching, this is recorded and we'll have it online by tomorrow morning.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
See you, everyone.